technology, but there was no way that the technology was all working together, and then it was telling me I had to do a million different things. So I hope you can actually see me and hear me now, because we're here to learn how to create awesome relationships. And I've actually got some notes so I don't forget anything, because it's actually a course that I've written, so I wanted to go over most of that. So I'll just keep an eye on the time and all the things that we need to talk about. Now, a lot of people sort of don't understand what's even important about communication. And communication is the most effective way we have to connect. And all of us want to connect. That's all we want to do mostly as human beings, is to connect with other people, connect with our loved ones and our partners, and connect with people at work and friends and when we're out. And it's a very primitive urge for all of us just to want to connect. So you have to pardon me. I've got a little bit of a cold this morning, so I'll do a little bit of drinking water so I don't completely ruin the whole webinar. And I'd like to invite you to send me lots of questions and things that I can answer for you afterwards. It's not so easy to do it through Google Plus to ask questions while we're live. So I'm hoping that you're here to learn how to change some things in your life, to make your relationships better. And I have a belief that if we change all our relationships, whether they're personal or professional, then the world will really change and become a better place. It's kind of like changing the world one conversation at a time. Now, I've learned some of this the hard way, because I'm kind of on the old end of life, but I have learned how to do communication through not only just life experience, but also going to school. And I became really, really focused on how we talk to each other and what's important about how we talk to each other, and that there are ways to learn the skills and the tools to make different conversations and have different outcomes, rather than having a lot of conflict. It's not really even necessary to have a lot of conflict. So there's important things, is that 85% of our 85% of our happiness in life is actually can be directly determined to our communication skills. And I say that on a lot of all information that I put out there, just because it's scientific based, and I like the science of that you can be educated, but if you do not have excellent communication skills, you're not going to be as successful. You won't have as good relationships as you could have. So what we're here to learn is the principles, and and I've also at the end, I'm just going to tell you some about the 5 steps as well, that really can create a stellar conversation. So it'll be a win-win, rather than creating more conflict and stress for yourself. Now, the things that are important that you get out of having learning good communication skills is that you'll have less stress in your life. You'll be more relaxed because you'll know yourself better. Your relationships will have less conflict. You'll be more successful at work because you'll be able to collaborate better, because you'll have the skills and the tools to be able to do that. Now, I did write that, in the preamble to all of that, and wrote out what the webinar, was going to be all about. And I did write, as I said, I did write some notes so I wouldn't forget things. But they're important to know that when you start out wanting to learn how to communicate, everyone says you have to communicate. Well, what does that really mean? So I've chunked it down to 5 principles that you need to learn if you don't already have them, or you need to actually make them even better than the ones that you already have, so you understand them and you can integrate them into all of your conversations. So 5 principles, and then 5 simple steps on how to have an easy conversation. So by the end of this webinar, you're going to know exactly how to do that. So there's other things that you get from knowing how to communicate. I can vouch for this, is you will be more content and happier with yourself, because you're going to be able to know yourself better. And I think that that's a really good thing. I think that that's what we all need in life, is to be able to learn more about ourselves and be able to express our needs and wants. Now, a lot of people can't do that when they talk to other people. They don't really know what they need. They don't really know what they want. And there's a lot of things that get in the way. So I can move on from the introduction of the webinar. And I have this outline. I got to keep that in tow so that I don't go over too long, because you just get tired of listening to me, I'm sure. So we've gone over what's really important about communication and why it's important to your happiness. Well, so You're going to have more successful relationships in all areas, have more success at work, and less conflict at home with your children, with your partners, and you'll be able to connect better with others. And basically, that's what it's all about. So the important part is that good communication starts with you. Now, everybody always thinks that good communication starts with other people, but actually it doesn't. Getting in touch with yourself and knowing yourself and being able to express that is where good communication starts. The other interesting point is that the truth is actually really quite simple. It seems really complex. We make it more complicated than it is. But every solution that we look for is 6 layers below where it actually presents itself. So you might be arguing about a toothbrush or the toilet seat, but it's not really about that. And we all know that. But the truth is simple, but it's getting to the truth. And so, as I said, Einstein said that every solution has to be found 6 layers below where it actually presents itself. I love that quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. So the other thing that's important about communication is this is a needs-based and values-based communication system. So it isn't just about communication in quotes, just how we communicate, but it's about knowing what our needs and values are and about yourself first. And I don't know how to stress that enough, but it is about yourself first. So we're going to go over some of those and how to understand that. And I think that the important thing to learn about communication too is that we do overcomplicate it. It is quite simple once we know the skills and the tools and the principles. So the first of the 5 is consciousness. Now, don't let that word scare you. It's just a woo-woo fancy word for really saying understanding yourself. The important part about knowing about yourself is that you can't really communicate well unless you know yourself and can understand yourself and not take things personally. So knowing yourself is noticing your feelings, noticing them in your body, understanding what your reactions and your responses are. Relationships are definitely inside work. Lots of couples come for counseling, and they always think it's about the other party, but really, it's really kind of individual work. It's not, there's a layer of couples work, and that's what we can learn together, the communication. But really, relationships are individual work. It's learning mostly about yourself, what you think, how you feel, what your principles are, your values, what you're committed to, and understanding that. Our reactions and our feelings are made up of what we think. Now, this is a really important point, and it's important to not believe everything that you think. So you don't have a feeling unless you think something. The thing you think can sometimes be in your subconscious, and it's a direct response from what somebody has done or what somebody has said. So that's why it's really important to get to the point where you're really understanding the connection between this person doing or saying this, or this event happening over here, what we think about the event, what we make it up to mean, what it is that's important about it to ourselves. And don't forget, we've all got a history with ourselves from the beginning of time. And that lots of events, the way things speak, way people speak, the way things happen, all mean different things to all of us. We have our own lens on how we're going to perceive that particular event. So I have this great perception that whenever I hear my dad's voice in this particular voice, it takes me back to being about 6 years old. So it drives me crazy because I go, oh my God, there's that voice. It's, but it's just made up from childhood, and it's knowing that. So becoming conscious of those particular reactions and responses that you have is the most important part about communicating. What are you thinking to yourself? What story are you making up to something to mean? Then what feelings is that leading to? So this is the most important part about communicating, because we can't even go anywhere from this particular, we can't launch any communication unless we're really understanding more about ourselves, how we're triggered, and where things are coming from. Now, we all have core tapes. I go into this in much more depth in the course that is an online course. about our core tapes and about feelings and how they impact you. But really, it's just important to know that if you can sort of look at your responses, have a timeout, and become more aware, more conscious, and more in touch with the parts of yourself that you need to express or you need to hold on to and go, wow, I'm not sure that that story is true, then that is the first part to becoming aware and conscious. So don't let the word conscious scare you. It's just knowing yourself. That's the important part. So the second principle, these are all C words, is compassion. Wow. So compassion is not sympathy. It is a feeling of deep empathy, care, and understanding. Now, we can't actually have good conversations without having an element of compassion for other people when they're upset, when somebody's struggling with something. It is being able to be with somebody's hurt and pain. They've been stricken with some upset. Now, the hard part is when you're in relationship with people, which we are every day, including yourself, is having compassion when they're upset at us. Now, that's always the hard part because we get triggered and then we lose the ability to have compassion. So the key element with compassion is not to take anything personally. And if you can get that and get that and get that, and just have that space between yourself and the other person, whoever it is, and realize that it's not personal. Whatever anyone else is going through, like put that white light out there, it's not about you. It's their own process. They're seeing things through their own filters. It has nothing to do with you. You're kind of like the mirror or the trigger, but it's not about you. So when you can do that, then your ability to have compassion grows exponentially. But that's the important part, is not taking anything personally, because then that allows you to have more compassion. You have to be patient with the process, patient with the other person. And the whole key thing about any relationship, healthy relationship, is that both parties, whoever it is, personally or professionally, child, parent, whatever it is, both parties need to feel heard, understood, appreciated, and accepted. So that is where the important principle of compassion comes in, is that for any resolution of differences or conflict of any sort, is you have to have compassion for each other. And the other element about that that's really important that I just learned recently is to always have compassion for yourself and not beat yourself up. So if you're not going to, have compassion for others, or you're going to have compassion for others, you sometimes really have to have compassion for yourself. It's a very important part of communicating, is having compassion. So the other part about compassion that is important is being able to compassionately reflect back what that person is experiencing. And that's when you can say, oh, you sound really upset. Do you want to tell me more about that? It sounds like this is what's happening. So compassionate reflection is just being with the person and showing them that you understand what they're saying. Because people do get upset. Even I get upset. We all get upset. We're human. So when we have somebody who can just go, wow, okay, tell me more about that. What's happening? Being compassionate. Empathy. It's not sympathy. It's not when you're feeling sorry for somebody. It's just when you're sitting there with compassion. So it can be difficult sometimes to do. It's not always an easy thing to be compassionate when there's conflict and stress. But there is a little out that I give people, which I think is really important to know, is take a time out. Now, the important part about taking a time out is making sure that you promise that you're going to come back, whether it's 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks. It's a professional thing. It might take 3 weeks to process something, but it's important to be able to take time out for yourself so you can come back with more compassion so that you can resolve things. Now, the neat thing, the next number 3 is curiosity. Now, curiosity is really just an action word for caring, and that really follows on top of compassion. Curiosity, man, I used to get in trouble for being curious as a kid. I was forever curious about what people thought and how they felt. And curiosity is such an important quality principle. It's so invaluable when it comes to relationships of any sort. It's being curious. You know, let's say your boss has just come in and he's upset about something, and you're having compassion for him because you realize he's just kind of having a bad moment. And the thing that follows on the compassion, oh, and the one thing I forgot to say about compassion is it's the antidote to pain and upset and hurt. So the opposite, it is the antidote. It is like the panacea of how to get through something that's hurtful when someone's hurting and there's having pain. So that's the important piece to know about compassion. And then what leads from that? I do apologize. Do apologize for that. Somebody was Skyping me. I don't know why someone's Skyping me in the middle of a webinar. Anyway, what I wanted to say was about curiosity is that it is the follow through after you've had some compassion. So being curious shows that you care, but you must never use the word why. Why sounds, I don't know if you've ever heard it in the same way that I know it to how it sounds to me, is it sounds like a criticism. Well, why would you do that? Like, or why? Why is just not a good word. Curiosity comes from using words like, well, how did that happen? What was that like? What was important about that? Questions that are open-ended that help help the other person see that you are really trying to understand their perspective, what's happening for them and what they're going through. Because sometimes it can seem like you don't understand. They're talking about it up here, and it takes a while to get to understand what it's really about. I do it with my sons a lot of the time, because boys can sound like they've got, lots of upsets about things, and until we kind of chunk it down with lots of curious questions, we find out that it's really about something much more simple. It's about a hurt or a pain, or they're upset, but of course they're acting angry. Now, the important part to know about curiosity is a lot of people think that when you see people that are angry, that's just where it is. Well, anger is a secondary emotion and is only a primary emotion if you're being attacked. It's a saving emotion that you need to have, but it's not really an emotion that's truthful when it comes to relationships. Other emotions are underneath anger. It's a secondary emotion. So that's where curiosity comes in, for you to discover what's really going on so that you can get down to the truth of the matter. So that's what curiosity gets you. Curiosity brings you the ability to find out what's underneath the upset and the anger and all the big feelings that are going on. And those big feelings are just presenting a wound, a pain, or a hurt that maybe the other person isn't necessarily aware of. When you're experiencing it, maybe you're not even aware of what it is. And that's where the first principle of consciousness comes in, is learning to process that you might feel angry here, or you're believing that you're angry, but it's not. So you getting curious about your own process and getting down to that it's something more. You're feeling frustrated, you're feeling hurt, sad, something like that. Those are more of the emotions that are basically what are underneath conflict and upset. Now, just so you know too, I forgot to tell you that all of this information you can find on my website at Connection Point Center. So you'll find all of these things that I'm mentioning, like the feelings, and I have a feelings list, I have a needs list, and every single bit of these pieces that I've talking about, consciousness and all of that, is all on my website, all in articles, so that you can print them off and have a look at them as you need them. Now, the interesting thing about curiosity that I really love is it means that you don't actually have to be responsible for knowing anything. You can just relax and just be curious. Kids are curious. Curiosity is like a mainstay of being human. That's how we learn and grow as kids, is being curious. So it's important to hang on to curiosity and know its value, that curiosity is invaluable when it comes to finding out what's going on. And I think that sometimes with curiosity, you have to be softly persistent in finding out. My kids kind of say it's being tenacious and like a Jack Russell Terrier, but I do think that being softly persistent in finding out is really important, because sometimes the other person isn't aware of what's going on for them. So that's curiosity. That's the third one. So now we can move on to commitment. Well, we all know what commitment is. Well, we all think we know what commitment is. Our lives actually show up and tell others what we're committed to. How we live our lives says what we're committed to. I talk about commitment in a slightly different way in relationship form, as about what we're responsible to and for, and what it is that you have committed to with a particular person, with a particular group. You've kind of made sets of rules. Rules aren't maybe the right way, but we all have sort of an idea of how the world works and how our relationships work and how our families work and how it's at work, professionally as well. So commitment is about responsibility. And responsibility is a hard concept to grasp sometimes in relationships, because I think it's human nature to want to blame other people for what we're thinking and how we're feeling. And that's not really true. That's where we need to learn to take responsibility. And that's what commitment is. And it's follow through. So the thing that's interesting about commitment and responsibility is follow through. Follow through. Do whatever you say you're going to say. Stick to your values and your needs. Be always honest about those. If you don't know them, then learn what your values and your needs are. This is what being a good communicator is all about. And that builds trust. So as we all know, trust is one of the most important things. Not one of the most important things, it's probably the most important thing when it comes to building relationships with people. So that's what commitment is. Commitment is building that trust with people, whether it's personal or professional. And if it's a personal relationship, commitment and responsibility goes along with attachment. Now, we all need to feel a strong sense of bond with people in our lives. Dr. Sue Johnson, who creates emotional focus therapy, she's the author of a couple of brilliant books about relationships that I just love, Hold Me Tight, and the other one's called Love Sense. So she describes how important it is that the attachment that we have with each other, especially with our primary partners and with our children, so for our children or for ourselves, that attachment is as important as what we did need and want with our primary caregivers as children. So the relationship that we have with our partners has to have that same sense of trust and bond. And when that's threatened, this is where commitment comes in. When it's threatened, that bond is like one of the biggest crises we can go through as human beings, is when that bond with our primary partners is threatened, whether we're a kid or whether we're an adult in a primary relationship. So that need and drive to have those attachments be safe and secure is really, really valuable. If that's the kind of relationships that we want to have. So that's what I'm suggesting commitment is all about, is the responsibility we have to be honest about ourselves, to be true about ourselves, authentic about ourselves, and then live up to what we say we're going to do. So commitment is pretty foundational. Like all of these principles that I'm describing are foundational to good communication and good relationships. So, and we can't sort of say, okay, yeah, well, these three are really important, but we don't have to do these two. But actually all five all go together and they build on each other. So that's why commitment is one of the most important things in all relationships. And we're all 100% responsible for our 100%. And that's a hard thing to kind of grasp. I think some of my couples find that really difficult when I say that really we're responsible for 100% of our 100%. And that's it. So follow through is simple if you're committed to following through. And it's as simple as you promised to call, so you call. You text through the day because that's what you do, then you text through the day. People build trust on that. It's not a difficult concept to grasp, but some people are committed to negative things. And we all know people in our lives that are committed to negative things. Some people are really committed to being angry all the time, or they're committed to being not collaborative. They're committed to not working. They're committed to alcohol. They're committed to drugs. So there's lots of things that we show in our lives that people are committed to, and our lives are a reflection of that. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Now, the fifth thing I think that's really the most important C word is courage. I think just life takes lots of courage. I don't know about you, but I think there's lots of times in life where it takes a lot of courage. Now, courage, the root word of courage is heart, core, means heart. So yeah, we know the stories about the Tin Man and the lion and where we need to have courage. And there is no courage unless there's fear. And I know personally and professionally that relationships can bring up lots of fear. It brings up our vulnerabilities. And I don't know if some of you have heard of Brené Brown, but she's one of my favorite people on the whole planet when she talks about vulnerability and how important it is to have vulnerability and what's good about vulnerability in relationship. So courage is doing what you're afraid to do. So without fear, there is no courage. Now, the thing about courage is it kind of ties into some of our in relationships. We all have elements of codependency, or we're afraid of the consequences of our actions or our words. And so it's difficult for us to do certain things or say certain things. We're not always, what would you say, honest. I don't think that honesty is necessarily the right word, but we don't necessarily have the courage to say what we need to say, what we want to say, and what the truth is for ourselves. That's what makes communication difficult. We all have elements of being codependent. That's like a really bad word from back in the 60s and 70s. But it's dysfunctional communication. When there's a power imbalance. It's when one person makes the relationship more important than the other. We aren't all codependent, but we all have, I think, certain elements of it. We don't want to upset people that we love, and I think that we're just trained like that socially. But in a normal situation, I'm going to tip over my cup if I do that. In normal situations, I think there is an element of fear in all of us to speak our truth, especially if it's different than what the relationship is expecting, or our other person is expecting, or if it's different, we're going against something at work. We have felt, it's hard to go up against people who bully us, and there's bullies everywhere. So bullying can be done in small and big ways, very subtle ways, and that's where it becomes really difficult. So courage, I think, is one of the most important principles that we all need to have. It takes courage to live and to be honest and talk about ourselves and to say things that are the hard things to say to other people. And I think that's just a fact. So suffice to say that relationships need a lot of courage. To be in healthy relationships, one needs to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is where fear comes in. So I'd love to read you what Brené Brown wrote about vulnerability. It's quite long. You can always Google it. But it is really lovely. Vulnerability is scary, but it's also a powerful and authentic way to live. Vulnerability is the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experiences. She defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So think about the vulnerability that you feel when you're with, your siblings, with your partner, sometimes I feel vulnerable with my children because they're adults. So we all feel those things. And I think that being vulnerable is a really important quality to have. And that's why we need courage. Now, the other place that courage comes in and is so important is in boundary setting. Now, a lot of people have very fluid boundaries, and that is a really difficult way to be in relationship with people. Boundary setting makes it simple for other people around you. This is my boundary. This is what I think. This is what I believe. This is what's important to me. And being able to do that takes an immense amount of courage, because you might be going against what other people think you should think, or how they've raised you, or what your partner believes, or at work. So again, boundary setting is an important skill to be able to do when you're in a relationship. And of course, it takes courage. So that's kind of why courage is so important. Learning the art of saying no. I think for a lot of people, being able to say no is a really hard thing to do. People are, I don't want to generalize about male and female roles. I don't want to have time to get into all of that, because there are some very interesting gender differences, or male and female energy, that comes up in relationship a lot. And I know as a girl, I was raised, well, you have to be nice, right? But learning how to say no has probably been, one of the biggest gifts I've learned how to do. And saying no is an important thing, but it takes courage. So that's why courage is up there. So those are the 5 main principles. There's lots of other great principles that we all need in relationship, but I think that those are the 5 main foundational principles that we need to stand on for good communication, to create good relationships, personally and professionally. It's how we can change the world if we are more conscious and we know more about ourselves. It's easier and it's simpler. It can stop a lot of conflict. Compassion, same thing. You don't have to have a lot of conflict when you know how to have compassion for yourself and for others. Curiosity. Oh my God, I just love that word. Curiosity just comes up, and I think it's a great word. I think it's because I was really, not allowed to be curious when I was a kid. So, excuse me, I'm sniffing with my cold. Curiosity is such a great quality. I love it now. Like, I think the other day my son said something, and it took me 2 days to figure out what, I hadn't really consciously been thinking about it, but I came up with the question that went with something. And I said, I'm just really interested in why, or what was it made you say that? And he just ended up great conversation, simply because 2 days later, I'd come up with this, I was really curious about what that meant. And so curiosity is a really good thing. And of course, commitment. It means different things to different people. And I think that commitment, because it means different things to different people, everyone has to define what they're committed to, and that's where responsibility comes in. So and of course, after commitment comes courage. How could we really manage life and manage all the terrain of life without having courage? So those are the important things. Now, of course, I do actually have 2 courses, but I'm going to tell you about those a little bit later. But one of the courses I've done is simply just on the 5 principles, and goes much more in depth and in how you become more conscious and how the right questions for curiosity. So a lot more depth. And then the other course is going to include all of those, but also it's actually a 7-step program on communication and how to do that, including, what I'd love to go over just a little bit, is how to have a difficult conversation. And because there is a 5-step simple formula for how to have what's the right word to say? A successful conversation. So if you want successful conversations, it's 5 steps. So I'll just tell you those 5 steps. Of course, the courses go into much depth on them, much more depth on how to do them. But the first part a lot of communication doesn't really talk about is intention. So, excuse me. So intention is that you do not have a conversation unless you really know what's important about having the conversation. So the first step is intention, is really understanding and knowing what your intention is in having that conversation. So it's that let's say somebody's upset or you don't know what's going on. I'm just going to say something simple. But your intention in wanting to have the conversation is A, to share something about yourself, maybe to ask for something to be different or just to be curious. But you have to be clear on your intention, that your intention is to connect with the other person. It's to create more love. It's to understand. When you are clear about what your intention is, then the conversation can start out in a more positive way because you can state your intention. You can say to somebody, I just want to have this conversation with you because I'm not feeling connected and I want to understand something, or whatever it is. But you have to come up with a really good intention statement before you have the conversation. So of course, the 4 steps after that are what it is that's your concern. And that doesn't have a judgment about the other person at all. It's just what the concern is. It could be when I see your clothes all over the floor, or whatever the thing is. When I see you upset, or you sound upset, and then you describe what's going on with you. So the first step is intention. The second step is just a description of the event or the upset or what it is that's going on for you that you need to talk about. But it's not about the other person. It's only about yourself. The next step is describing how you feel. And feelings don't, it's like this or like that. Feeling is, I feel. And then that's why that list I have on my website is really handy, because sometimes we don't always know how we feel. Our bodies always know how we feel. But we have to tap into that and use feeling words. Because then the next part is, number 4, is about your needs and principles and values. So then you describe, because I'm feeling, I don't know, sad or whatever it is that's going on for you, or I'm feeling anxious or worried or scared or whatever the feelings are. Then you say what your needs and values are. Now, again, I've got lists of needs and values. They're different than feelings. So I've got one of those are all on my website as well. You can print them off. Needs and values are your principles, because you have a value for respect, because you have a principle for compassion and you're asking somebody for compassion, or whatever it is that your principle is that you're standing on. You have, you have a value for, I have a value for tidiness. I have great conversations with my children about tidiness. So, I mean, we all have things that are important to us and they make us feel certain things, whether it's the toothbrush or the toilet seat or things on the floor. And then, of course, all the most really important things for respect or being treated well or collaboration, all of those things. So there's lots of principles and things that you can describe in the 4th section. Now, the 5th part is where you ask. If you need a request, you might need to make a request, or you need to ask somebody for something. Now, the important part about this is that sometimes you have to be careful when you're having these conversations, that you don't have a hidden agenda that you really want something to happen and you're going to make it happen at all cost. Well, it's not really like that. These conversations are about respect and about caring for other people and collaborating. I think collaboration is a really important C word for communication. So when you get to this part, this is where you make a request for what you need. That's why you have to understand what it is that you need, what it is that you value, and what's important. And you have to be okay with maybe you might get a no. You might get a yes, you might get a no, but you might also actually need to maybe work with that person and come up with something that's middle of the road. But that's just kind of where you make an ask and make your request and then go from there. So the 5 steps are quite simple to have a successful conversation. And I am, again, talking about a personal conversation with your kids, with your partners, with your friends, but also professionally. These principles and the 5 steps all work in any relationship anywhere, including professional ones. So the 5 steps, again, are the intention, the event, you just describe the event, or whatever's going on without judgment, feelings, and then your needs, and then your ask. It's 5 steps. It's really simple. Now, it sounds like, it might be difficult, but it's actually not. Once you get used to doing it like that, it just becomes second nature. So that's the good part about communication, is that it sounds like a formula, but when you get the formula working, it's fantastic. So we kind of reached the end of the overview of what good communication is. So I hope you've taken some notes and written things down. Please go on my website and find tons of information. So that's connectionpointcenter.com. The other place you can go is to successfulcommunicationmadesimple.com, which actually has the 2 courses. So the first course is just the principles and goes into much depth, deeper overview of that and how to do it, and has some exercises in it to find out some things about yourself, and it's really good. And then the other course has all of these. It's actually 7 modules, anywhere from up to about 45 minutes each module. So it's a much more in-depth course. Of each of these, it has some, as I said, it has some visualizations, it has some exercises and things like that, printouts and all of that. And then it also goes into much more depth about the 5 steps on how to have a successful conversation. So this is basically your webinar for today. And I enjoyed doing this so much, I think I can do it again. Anyway, it was a little bit difficult at the beginning of the technology, and I do apologize for that. So next time, hopefully I'll have it all completely set out so it's better. I tried it yesterday, and then I guess today it just was determined not to work. So I'd also really like to invite you to connect with me by email or by text, cell phone. You can call me anytime if you have questions and anything you'd like to know more about. So you can actually get me just with my first name, Mia, at connectionpointcenter.com. That's my email. And you can also reach me at 778-952-4797. And I really look forward to connecting with you. It's one of my most important things in the world, is to connect with others. And please ask or email me, ask me questions if you have anything you'd like to know, because I've really enjoyed writing the course. It's been incredibly helpful in my own life, and I hope it will be in yours as well. So it's Sunday. I hope you go and enjoy your Sunday, and I will be seeing you soon. And take care, and I'm going to turn off the broadcast now. Talk to you later. Bye now.